There are many different flavors of OTK strategies in Yu-Gi-Oh! But one of the most common OTK-enabling strategies involves monsters that attack repeatedly, the true progenitor of the style being Zane from GX. From the double strident blast of Cyber Twin Dragon to the ultra-violent evolution burst of Chimera Tech Overdragon, wailing on an opponent's board of helpless monsters. Sating a thirst for destruction is something that appeals to the caveman DNA still left over in our brains. Multi-attacking is my favorite thing in the game. If there's a card relating to it, no matter how obscure, I've at some point attempted to play with it. However, a lot of the time, multi-attacking is only made good by way of invalidating the game. Early Fright Fur could make Tiger to wipe your opponent's field, then use Fright Fur Fusion to make Wolf to wail on a defenseless opponent. The deck can still do that, hell, they even have another guy that can attack twice, but it's not really a core game plan. Chimera Tech Rampage Dragon wipes out all your opponent's back row, then sends bodies to grave to gain multi-attacking. And if it's made with Power Bond, you can then throttle your opponent with no issue. But that's not really reflective of the average game of Cyber Dragon outside of earlier Duel Links. And the days of Cyber Twin OTKs are long behind us. These can feel satisfying the first few times you execute them, but over time, they get pretty dull, since the nature of the strategy is to wail on a helpless opponent. It's not exactly liberating to beat on the downtrodden. The good news is, as a strategy for an entire archetype, this type of design has never really seen any widespread success, since the intent behind the design is pretty shallow. However, shallow design can be a danger if it's also cynical. As it turns out, there would be an instance where cynical design around this did cause a problem. That being from a pairing of generically summonable links, as that meant certain decks could perform this song and dance 100% of the time, whereas previously decks needed specific card combos to even pull it off. This pair of links being Update Jammer and Access Code. Update Jammer is a card that just grants a link multi-attacking if you use him as material for its link summon. Access Code made with Update Jammer would give you a 4K idiot minimum that could then pop an entire board without being interrupted, then swing twice for game. But this wasn't attached to a specific named archetype itself, just the generic collection of Cybers monsters. Despite the poor structure behind these, they went away without any part being banned. That's because they still took some level of commitment to actually go through, enough that there was still a chance your opponent could reasonably prevent it. And even in scenarios where they couldn't, the issue just so happened to be more so to do with the overall balance of the Cybers deck in question. So what if this design got even more cynical? Tenpai is an archetype built on this philosophy, and it ended up actually seeing consistent competitive success, to the dismay of everyone playing the game, with the deck's playstyle even being deemed a plague, viewed as utterly boring to play with and against, with a playstyle seeking to remove any and all meaningful gameplay interactions possible from the equation. The worst part about Tenpai is the fact that I wished for this. However, it would seem I wished on a monkey's paw. A long time ago, I came across Trident Dragion, a big stupid dragon synchro that can attack multiple times. Naturally, because of my affinity for multi-attacking, I wanted to play this card, but realized there was no good way to do so. Despite the abundance of dragons in the game, there were no pure dragon synchro archetypes. The Rose Dragons and Blue Eyes are strategies that aren't purely dragon, with Blue Eyes not even being dedicated to synchros. Dragunity, the archetype you would think is the dragon synchro archetype, technically isn't. Their non-tuners are winged beasts. The Black Wings and Fursuits have more dedication than them. While they have a handful of main deck non-tuner dragons, that's not really a compelling case to play Dragion with them. This highlights a weird conscious decision to never design a purely dragon synchro archetype. People joke about Worm being Dragon too, but I can't help but think they decided dragons can never be a synchro archetype, so they had to make a second version of them just for that, since every Worm archetype either is synchro-oriented or at least has one. If they feared the power dragons would hold if they could synchro, they didn't exactly care that much when they finally decided to actually do it. Fittingly, they would make the first pure Dragon Synchro archetype entirely dedicated to Dragion, since it's a Synchro that requires only dragons and was effectively unplayable for most of its life. Because of its multi-attacking, they then settled on a battle-focused design for the archetype, a playstyle that's been historically mocked for the better part of 2 decades. Hell, on Tenpai's release, people thought it was going to be bad, or worse, had a centrist stance.
Would this top a YCS? I think this could potentially, in this day and age today, maybe top a YCS.
Remember, never be a centrist, just be right. How did they go about making a battle phase oriented archetype viable in the modern day? Of course, by printing a card that just invalidates gameplay. Battle phase oriented decks struggle to get to the battle phase safely. How do we mitigate that issue? Just turn off all the interaction before then. Great idea. I have 2 theories as to why Sangan summoning exists. Theory 1, the person responsible for the Watch Sport that released around the same time snapped when it didn't pan out, then made Tenpai his retribution. Theory 2, Konami tasked someone with making a new battle-oriented deck that's actually meta, with the threat that they'd be fired if they didn't, which would explain a lot. Could be the case that both theories are true. Sangan summoning is the heart and soul of the deck. Other than just invalidating all interactions with your monsters, it serves as the deck's search spell, like most field spells. It does have you discard afterwards, despite the deck not really wanting to put cards in grave, since it does just want to throw out a million board breakers and swing with all its names, but the bit of revival present doesn't make it entirely out of place. And considering the overall toxic playstyle, no one's exactly crying a river over it not being an omnipresent part of the deck's design. What I'm personally mad about is the fact Sangan summoning is the only card with a beneficial effect if it gets popped in the archetype. Dragion's effect lets you pop up to 2 cards you control, then it gains additional attacks for each card it pops. Summoning lets you double its attack. That's it. They could have utilized the popping to accomplish more things with the deck's overall design, and just chose the laziest design direction, cramming everything into a field spell and making it as utterly bland as possible. What was the point of giving Dragion an archetype if you didn't actually care about utilizing it? The original Dragion isn't even that important to the deck's win condition. It only ever really mattered if you were OTKing through Prosperity, which is a sign the deck's design is already overkill. When it mattered, but it's clear they didn't structure the deck around this card. He's just tacked on for no real reason. His retrained Transcendent Dragion makes the deck's design even more insufferable, as your opponent then can interact with you in the battle phase. So, with both it and summoning in play, your opponent legitimately can't do anything. Well, clearly, this just means you have to stop them from getting to Dragion. Because of this deck's consistency and the low commitment to get to Dragion, you pair that with a million board breakers and the inability to interact with them in the main phase, yeah, you're not gonna have much of a board to use. The deck's core gameplay loop sees you summoning out all the main deck names to attack, then synchro them off as a quick effect. This creates a battle-oriented synchro combo gameplay loop. You synchro into Biden Dragion, attack with it, attack with another Tenpai, and since their synchro effects are soft once per turns, Fadra recurs a name to use again. Synchro off Bident for Transcendent, attack until you trigger its revival effect, to which it can then attack again. Then synchro it off for the OG Dragion, and wipe your opponent out. Assuming you didn't already get there with the multiple attacks of all the Tenpais and the other Dragions. This gameplay loop is secured by a simple combo of effects. Pydra prevents you from taking damage in battle, so even if you have to attack into stronger monsters, you never risk knocking yourself out. Fadra then combos with this to secure an ultimate defense on offense, making it so your monsters can't be destroyed in battle either. This dynamic makes it feel like the deck has absolutely no weaknesses in its design. This is a cool design premise, but its implementation isn't in the slightest. This is the laziest and most cynically designed archetype in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! It doesn't engage with the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It doesn't engage with the theme of its own archetype. It doesn't engage with the design of its own boss monster. It only engages with the idea of an uncontested victory. It's utterly hollow. So the question is, how do you even redirect this into something more interesting? For starters, ban Transcended Dragion and Sangan Summoning. These are literally the worst designed cards in the archetype. If it's going to provide healthier gameplay, these two just have to go because they're a detriment to actually expanding on the archetype's design. Neither extreme is going to be welcome in an environment where the deck actually does more, and it never was welcome to begin with. All they have to do is print a new searcher to replace that function of Sangen summoning, and come up with a healthy level 10 synchro replacement. I love that the deck actually utilizes the battle phase as its main phase of play for multiple different unique gameplay interactions. It gives them a way to get around a litany of cards that require it be the main phase, making it so the deck has a unique way to lessen the effectiveness of an opponent's cards without the need to actually print cards like these. They just need to further expand on the innate strength and design opportunities provided by using the battle phase. They could even go so far as to implement design that more explicitly utilizes the tight window of the damage step. Fadra and Chandra already do to an extent, but you'd be forgiven for not realizing it, since the deck usually invalidates interaction altogether before that becomes relevant, making them redundant if anything. Considering the quick effect synchro design, it could be neat to have grave effects on bodies that fiddle with stats during damage step. Other than purely boosting raw numbers, they could genuinely afford to play off of destruction effects that occur during damage calculation, similar to how Rush Headlong works. Since their intended gimmick is to attack multiple times, being able to fade one of the attacks just to fire off a destructive effect gives it more depth and gameplay flair. The reason most battle phase oriented archetypes suck is because they're entirely dependent on it to do anything meaningful for their gameplay. And in the case of Gladbeast, don't trigger until after the battle phase has ended and they've attacked. Tenpai cards still do things that are competent outside of battle, and more importantly, don't need to destroy monsters in battle to utilize their best effects. It still has the innate weakness that going first, there's no battle phase, but that's a very solvable issue. Give the deck traps. Pydra sets a spell trap. The deck has one trap that isn't good, and one spell that the game plan is defined by. And the only other good spell gets made worse by being set. I wonder what card you're gonna set off it. Trap design would have merit in Tenpai if they had a clause to activate the turn they're set during the battle phase. This is legitimately one of the best solutions to Tenpai's biggest problem, as you can give them cards that actually give them a turn 1 game plan natively, but can also be used when going second. These can also be in-engine cards that do more going second. The board breaker blowouts were a part of what made the deck so annoying to play against, since they would just drop as many as possible until the board was empty, then punch you to death for game with any of their one-card combo enablers. Instead of making the deck dependent on this miserable playstyle, just give the archetype actual quality cards in-engine for going second, designing them to actually enable a unique playstyle. Designing more traps also lends to fleshing out another part of design that should have been fleshed out to begin with. Cards that benefit from being popped. It pisses me off to no end. This deck is based around a guy that pops your own cards, then they gave the deck a singular card you want to pop. They have cards they can leave on field and pop, those being any Tenpai monster, as well as Furo and Kaiho, but those aren't good pops, nor are Furo and Kaiho even worth playing to begin with. Actually make the idiot you built the entire archetype around important to its playstyle. It can even be more reserved in that they just recur themselves if they get popped, preventing the deck from losing card value, in a similar vein to how the White Forest spell traps work. The OG Dragion, who is the entire reason behind the archetype existing, is a glorified cowboy for game. It should actually play a crucial role in making the deck it's the face of operate. Besides traps, I really like the design principle of Kaiman and would like to see more quick plays like it. Bonuses if used in the battle phase should be the archetype's signature design with spells. It gives the deck flexibility and unique strength. This clause can even be used as a means of integrating archetypal design around being better going second, as an applied effect for it being the battle phase could mean something that only really applies in that context. Kaiman is purely a play enabler. If you design more cards like it, splitting the difference in the design would be better for the deck overall. Forcing the opponent into the battle phase sounds like an interesting control gimmick for Tenpai. Kaiho already poses this idea, but it's not remotely good considering the context of the deck itself, and were it to be good with Transcendent Legal, it'd be miserable. But removed from that, being able to whiff your opponent's battle phase seems like a really strong control effect for the archetype, forcing your opponent to play only during the main phases, showcasing how the deck has absolute control over the battle phase. In terms of main deck names, the deck could use another one like Genroku, specifically in that they have tuner and level flexibility. ability. They could also just introduce level 3 tuners for the archetype in general. The deck has all these level 3s, and Genroku can be a level 3 tuner, making it so it's possible to make Synchro 6s, but there's no real reason to toy with that idea, especially considering the Fire Dragon options. A new wave of support could give them 6s as an alternate gameplay branch, which can also still lead into making 10s because of their 4s. It's also possible they explicitly design Synchro 6 plays to be their in-archetype means of going first plays, designing any new main deck level 3 tuners and their corresponding Synchro 6s to give the deck some reliable control strategy going first. When it comes to iterating on their existing design structure, I think they'd only need one new guy that can summon from hand during the battle phase, revealing itself at the start of the battle phase, then letting you summon a Tenpai from hand. This way the deck has more innate extension, which, assuming the deck's balance actually appropriately gets reined in, would help the deck still perform well. A final element of design they could lean into is the difference in turn players' battle phase, having continuous cards with strong play enabling effects during your battle phase, and solid control effects during your opponent's battle phase. This way, they don't have to bloat the archetype with a million new cards, and if the play-enabling effects get negated, their control effects can still help out play on the opponent's turn. Tenpai is one of the most mindless archetypes in the game, and that's because they're the most mindlessly designed archetype. With actual thought put behind future design for the archetype, it fully has the potential to be something interesting. But that's assuming they actually care to go forward with that philosophy in mind. Until then, we'll have to keep waiting for a battle-oriented archetype that is both competent and healthy. I just realized I've been using the wrong pronunciation of Songen summoning this entire time. You weren't summoning this idiot. I'm not redubbing this. Just ban the damn card so this doesn't happen again.